Content analysis. Content analysis is a research method used to analyse secondary data. So data that is already published and already exists. It's often used to analyse things like interview transcripts, transcripts of therapy sessions. It might be used to look at official statistics such as crime data. So it indirectly observes the presence of words, images, or concepts. A really simple example of content analysis is Wainforth and Dunbar's research. They undertook a content analysis of Lonely Hearts columns, and what they were looking for was evidence to support the evolutionary theory of attraction, that men offer resources and are looking for attractive, youthful partners, as that's an indicator of fertility, and women are the opposite. They offer their attractiveness and they are looking for resources. So they're looking for a man that's got the resources to care for them during pregnancy, childbirth, and child rearing. So what they did was they just took Lonely Hearts adverts from a newspaper and just highlighted every time a male offered resources and every time they were asking for an attractive or youthful partner, and then did the same with females every time they were advertising attractiveness and every time they were looking for resources, and then just simply count up the number of times that these things occurred to see whether or not it supported the theory. So this is an example of a top-down analysis. The categories, in this case resources and attractiveness, were decided before the research took place. What it does demonstrate to us really clearly is the problem with content analysis. One of the major problems is subjective interpretation. So, for example, what counts as a resource? What counts as attractiveness? If, for example, a male had said in their advert, businessman, we could say that that was a clear indication of resources because they were talking about their job and it implied that they'd got a good salary. However, if they wrote artist, then that becomes a little bit more ambiguous. Are they a poor, struggling artist, or are they a very successful artist? The same with attractiveness, because obviously there are vast differences in what people find attractive, and we can also think about cultural differences there as well. Let's look a little bit further into our strengths and weaknesses. Content analysis is really quick and easy and ethical. That's because it's secondary data. The data already exists. We haven't got to go to the trouble of collecting all our own data. It's there. We don't have to worry about consent. Hopefully the person who compiled the data in the first place took care of all those things. It's very useful for looking at historical data and seeing trends over time. So, for example, we could do a content analysis of crime statistics 10 years ago and crime statistics today to see what the changes had been in types of crime, what had increased and what had decreased. And content analysis is also very reliable. Because the data already exists, people can check it. So we can use inter-rater reliability. Two people can look at the same piece of secondary data and see if they agree. The problems, though, are we cannot establish cause. As we saw in the last example, were people writing their adverts in that way because that's what they were really looking for, or is it just because they thought that's what you should write in a Lonely Hearts ad? The data might also lack validity. We don't know who collected it in the first place, how they collected it, so we don't know how valid it is. And the biggest issue with content analysis is that subjectivity of the coding, subjectivity of what counts. In our previous example, what counts as a resource, what counts as attractiveness. One thing you might like to do to increase your understanding of content analysis is do a little bit of research yourself. A really easy one to carry out is a content analysis on TV adverts on children's TV. So you might want to look if they display gender bias. How many are aimed at a specific gender? How many are gender neutral? So, for example, how many show boys playing with boys' toys and girls playing with girls' toys, etc. The content analysis we've looked at so far was a really simple one, just highlighting every time things occurred. We're now going to look at more detailed content analysis. So we're going to look at how we'd analyse qualitative data. And the way we do that is through thematic analysis. And as the name suggests, we look for emergent themes in the data. We code them and then interpret their meanings. But there are potential issues with thematic coding. So what do you think they might be? The main issue is this idea again of subjective interpretation. What one person might code as a theme might not agree with what another person says. Thematic analysis can be top-down or bottom-up, and this relates really to observations being structured and unstructured. So a top-down analysis is very much like a structured observation. You start off with a list of the themes that you are looking for. So if you were doing a content analysis of a recording of a therapy session, you might already have decided that you're going to look for the symptoms of depression. And every time you see a symptom of depression, so problems with appetite, problems sleeping, you simply tick it off on your tally chart, just like a structured observation. Bottom up is much more open-ended, so no initial assumptions are made. The researcher would simply read or watch the media through without any codes, and then once they've done that, decide on what appropriate codes and what themes have emerged. So to give you an example, here's a list of the symptoms of clinical depression, which I'm sure you're familiar with from your study of psychopathology. So if I was looking through a transcript of a therapy session, every time I saw a mention of inability to concentrate or think clearly, I'd code it 7. Every time I saw a mention of loss of energy or being tired, I'd code it 3, and so on. Let's just check your understanding now. So let's look at some multiple choice questions. So what type of data is content analysis carried out on? Is it A, primary, B, secondary, C, quantitative, or D, qualitative? Hopefully you said A, secondary data. Question 2, what type of thematic analysis makes no initial assumptions? A, top-down, B, bottom-up, C, qualitative analysis, or D, quantitative analysis? B, bottom-up. What type of thematic analysis does make initial assumptions? A, top-down, B, bottom-up, C, qualitative analysis, or D, quantitative analysis? A, top-down. Our final 2 questions. What sort of data did Wainforth and Dunbar's study generate? A, primary, B, secondary, C, qualitative, or D, quantitative? D, quantitative, because they were counting up the number of times resources and attractiveness were being mentioned. And finally, what is a limitation of content analysis? A, objective, B, scientific, C, subjective, D, in-depth. Hopefully you said C, subjective. Let's now look at some exam questions so that you can see how to apply this knowledge in an exam situation. This question was from paper 2 in 2018. It was a research methods question, so the STEM's quite long because they were asking other questions on it. What's important for us is to think about what they were looking at. So they were looking at dream themes and they did an interview. So we're looking at the transcript of an interview from this study about dreams. So our question, another researcher who did not know the purpose of the study carried out a content analysis of the interview data. And the question was, explain how this content analysis could have been conducted. Well, first of all, the researcher did not know the purpose of the study. That means that they couldn't have done a top-down analysis because they wouldn't have known what themes to be looking for. So they've got to do a bottom-up one. Also notice the question says, explain how. So we need details. We can't just say it's bottom up, and it's 4 marks as well. So we need to say the researcher could have carried out a bottom up thematic analysis of the interviews. The researcher would firstly read the interviews with no preconceived ideas, because remember they didn't know the purpose of the study. They would then identify emergent themes such as dreams of being chased, dreams of falling, dreams of school, etc., and code them appropriately. Again, with research methods questions, you need context, and that's why we've got that sentence in. We're talking about the types of dreams. Once all the dreams were coded, the data would then be collated and analysed to see if there were significant differences in the themes in male and female dreams, again linked to the content. The psychologist wanted to assess the reliability of the content analysis. Explain how the reliability of the content analysis could be assessed. So here we need to mention inter-rater reliability. When it's 4 marks, one good rule of thumb is to think about writing 4 substantial sentences, and then you will have covered all the marks. It doesn't always work, but it's a good idea to try and do that. So the psychologist could have used inter-rater reliability. To do this, 2 or more researchers would all analyse the interview transcripts and code them. Their codings would then be compared to see if there was an 80% concordance rate in their findings. And concordance rate simply means agreement. So did they agree 80% of the time? If there was an 80% concordance rate, then the content analysis could be said to be reliable. This question appeared in 2023 on paper 1 on the psychopathology section. So the STEM was, participants with depression were asked to keep a daily diary of their experiences as part of their therapy. 2 researchers analysed the same extracts from the diaries using content analysis. And the question was very simple, what is content analysis? So content analysis is a research tool used to determine the presence of certain words, themes or concepts within some given qualitative data that's secondary data. So using content analysis, researchers can quantify and analyse the presence, meaning and relationships of certain words, themes or concepts. The follow-up question was explain one way the researchers could have used content analysis to analyse the diary extracts in this investigation, which was worth 2 marks. I've used bottom-up. The researchers could have used bottom-up content analysis. To do this, they would firstly just read the diary extracts and identify the emergent themes. Once the emergent themes had been identified and given a code, they would then go back through the extracts and code them to analyse the data. You could answer this though using top-down. You would just need to explain it to get the second mark. The final question. The two researchers' analysis of the diary extracts were found to be quite different. In other words, they didn't agree. Explain how the reliability of this content analysis could be improved. So how can we make them more so that they do agree? Again, 4 marks, so try and think about 4 sentences. The reliability of this content analysis could be improved by better training of the researchers. This would ensure they were better able to identify the emergent themes and code them appropriately. It might have been better to do a top-down analysis where the researchers were given pre-identified themes and codes, such as the symptoms of depression, because that's what the STEM was about, depression. Hopefully, this would enable the researchers to reach the 80% concordance rate, which is necessary for research to be considered reliable. I hope you found this video useful and that you've now got a better understanding of content analysis. If you still feel you've got some questions, please read the relevant chapters in your textbook. Thank you for listening.